Hey guys, welcome back. It's Chris, and you're probably wondering, wow, this isn't a live stream. So normally I'm posting all the live streams over on this channel, and I rarely do any uploaded videos. But here it is. I had an idea. Actually, some of you guys brought it to my attention. A lot of people have been messaging me after the latest stream that I did, saying that I tell really good stories and you want to hear more of my stories. And I noticed that, the live streams are pretty long. Some of them go 2, 3, 4 hours even. And that's not very searchable. And I don't want somebody to have to watch an entire video just to try to find one certain topic that I'm talking about. So I decided after my live streams, maybe I can take some of that information and condense it into a dedicated video so it's more searchable for you guys. So I'm just going to start telling some of my stories here on this channel in smaller videos. And I think I'm going to start out with the first one being how and why I went vegan. And I know that if you are followers of my other channel, The Vegan Zombie, then you've likely already seen my video. I've done a couple videos on this, usually each year on my vegan anniversary. I tell the story. But if you're new to the channel and you just want to hear my story, here it is right here. So it starts when I was 14 years old. This is way back in 1990, and I was really into martial arts at the time. I mean, most kids my age were, and I had a friend that lived across the street from me. Actually, we're still really good friends today, and his family friend was into the martial arts ninjutsu, and he was friends with my friend's older brother. And he was in town one day, and I was over there. We were in the driveway one spring morning, and he was asking me about, I think I brought up the fact that I did karate, and he was like, well, I trained ninjutsu, and we were talking, and we came up with the idea that he would come into town when he was free, and we would all train ninjutsu with him. So it was me, 2 other friends, that kid's older brother, and him. So it was about a group of about 5 of us. And he would come into town once, maybe twice a month, and we would train ninjutsu. This was, at the time, as 14 years old, that was the best day of my life, finding out I was going to start training ninjutsu with this guy. And this guy, his name was Chris, and he was a little bit older than me, but back then, just a few years is a pretty big difference when you're only 14 years old. So I think he was like 5, maybe 4 or 5 years older than me. So he was a good 18, 19 years old. And he lived his life as closely to ancient ninjas as he could. He practiced learning the language, the Japanese language. He was a minimalist. He really had very little possessions. He read a lot of books, and we would train. We would do these kind of amazing trainings. We would go out into the woods, dressed in our ninja gear, and we would have these unique trainings that was so different from what I trained in karate. And we would be like one with nature, but we would also do the techniques, the different defensive and offensive moves that the ninjas did. And then one day, before we went out for our training session, he said to us that the ancient ninjas were predominantly vegetarian. And he was a vegetarian. And that he wanted to introduce us to some of the foods that were vegetarian as well. So he had with him a couple containers and a pot of tea he started making. It was a green tea. He had something that he called tabbouleh and something that he called tofu. And I had never heard of the other two. I've heard of green tea, but I never heard of tabbouleh or tofu. But I knew at that point that if he was going to be eating it, and if the ancient ninjas were eating this stuff, minus I don't think that the ancient ninjas ate tabbouleh, but I'm sure they ate tofu, that I wanted it. I wanted to try it, no matter if it was good or bad. I was going to eat it, and I did. We all tried it, and you guys that have had tofu before, you know that taste of tofu. It's really no taste whatsoever. It's like it comes in water and it's very wet and you eat it. Tofu takes on the taste of whatever you season with, but this was not seasoned, it was not cooked, it was just raw tofu. And to me, it didn't really taste like anything. It was like a unique taste that I've never tasted before. And to this day, if I eat raw tofu, it's got that nostalgic aspect to it that brings me right back to that day. And the tabbouleh was pretty minty. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. And from then on in, my two friends and I, we decided after he left, we're like, well, we're going to be vegetarian now. I mean, this guy was my idol. And if he was doing it and the Ancient Ninjas did it, I wanted to do it. So I overnight went vegetarian. And to mark that, and this was something that came from the mind of a 14-year-old kid, I had two buddies, and one of them and myself decided that we were going to take one of the ninja symbols that we were learning, a Japanese character that was called ninpo. It's something that the ninjas used, and what it meant was the blade over the heart. So the blade is protecting the heart. And we decided we were learning different pressure points and all that. So I believe, if I remember correctly, that the pressure point that we wanted to use with this was called Yobitsubo. And I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that's how I learned it. And it was a pressure point right here on between your thumb and your index finger. That's a pressure point. And we chose that area and we gave ourselves little tattoos of that ninpo Japanese symbol. And there it is right here on my hand. Some people think, oh, you got a mark in your hand or you got dirt on your hand. No, I've had this since I was 14. And this is the only tattoo on my body, by the way. And I don't know why, but we decided, like, well, we can't put it somewhere like big or something where it's going to be really noticeable. Let's just put it right on our hand. Yeah, we thought that was a good idea, but I don't regret it. I look at this and it's got meaning behind it. And my buddy also has the same tattoo. And that kind of marked the beginning of the journey that I consider to be the best decision I ever made, not knowing it at the time, because it brought me to where I am today. Well, anyway, so as time went on here, being 14 and living under my parents' roof and not having a job and, being dependent on my parents, they didn't exactly support me when I went vegetarian. And they thought what a lot of people think, especially back in the 90s with no internet, no YouTube, no Google, no way to really look it up. Not many people really knew the health benefits, and it wasn't easily accessible back then. And my parents thought that I was going to make myself sick. But I was very stubborn, and I'm like, no, I'm doing this. For instance, I would go upstairs when they were having dinner, and I'd be like, I'm hungry. And they're like, well, if you ate what the rest of us ate, you wouldn't be hungry. But I was very stubborn, and I never gave in to that. And for me, I know different people have different journeys and different reactions and different experiences. But for me personally, it was something new in my life, and it was like a challenge, but it was fun because I was challenging myself to have to eat a whole new way now without any meat. And I started learning to cook my own foods in the kitchen. And I started with things like, any young kid would try to make. I started out with like pastas and rice and spaghetti and of course peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And I started out as a junk food, vegetarian. And I didn't really know too many vegetarians at that point. But I did know that I loved animals, and I always loved animals. And the more I think back about it, I never really liked meat. I was that kid that would eat meat, and I would eat what my parents would put on the table and say I'd had to eat it for dinner. And more often than not, I'd be like chewing, and then spit it out in my napkin. I I wasn't a big fan. But I never really thought too much about it. But I did know that I loved animals, and I did a lot to save animals. I remember specifically, I was riding my bike home on a summer day as probably a 12 or 13-year-old kid, and there was, I believe it was a woodchuck or a beaver or something like that, and it had been run over by a car on the side of the road, and it was still alive, and I felt really, really terrible. And I picked it up and I put it on my handlebars, and I rode my bike home to my parents' house, and I brought it in the yard, and it wasn't really moving too much, but it was still breathing. And I told my mom, I'm like, Mom, we just gotta save this. We gotta go to the vet. And we did. I picked it up and put it in a blanket, and we went to the vet, and we dropped it off with the vet. And I don't know what happened after that, but I was happy because I thought the vet would save it. And that's probably not what happened, but he probably put it out of its misery or something. But anyway, as time went on, I started learning more and more about myself being a vegetarian, and I started meeting other vegetarians, and then I heard the word vegan, and I thought that's a little bit too crazy, and I didn't think that anything that I ate was hurting animals, because I didn't know at the time, and there wasn't very much of anything telling anybody what was really happening in the meat and dairy industry. So for me at the time, if I wasn't eating meat, then I wasn't hurting the animals. So I still ate dairy, and I kind of tried to stay away from eggs. So I wouldn't eat like any kind of like scrambled eggs or anything straight up like that, but I would eat things that had egg in it. Like if there was a cake that had egg in it, like if I didn't see it, that was fine. But I never ate anything that was meat or meat derived, meaning I worked at a pizza shop for a little while, and they had cheese that had rennet in it. And rennet is the lining of a goat stomach or a cow stomach. And so that means if there's rennet in the cheese, then animals died for that cheese. And that's how I gauged that. I would stay away from all of that kind of stuff, and I would only eat something that I thought was strictly vegetarian. And about 4 years after I went vegetarian, now it's 1994, I had pretty much just graduated from high school, and I had a couple friends that were vegan, and I was at Taco Bell, and my friends got food and I got food. I got, I think, a cheese burrito or something like that, bean burrito with cheese on it. And as I was sitting there, I started thinking about veganism, and I thought to myself that, wow, this is all the same industry. The dairy industry does hurt animals, and when you really think about it, it was gross. It was so gross that, for other reasons, I was pretty much a germ freak most of my life, and I didn't even want to drink something out of the same cup as one of my friends, let alone drinking milk that came out of the udders of another animal, with infection and bacteria and all kinds of stuff. And the more I thought about it, the more it just made sense that, to me, I didn't consider any animal products to be food. And I understood that people still ate it, but I wanted nothing to do with it. And the analogy I usually give people is, like, I wouldn't try to eat my phone because it's not edible. Well, I wasn't going to try to eat anything that came from an animal either, because to me it's not food and it's not edible, and I didn't want any part of it. So I started to think, like, what else can I eat? Thousands of different plants and nuts and seeds and different things that I can make do with. And at the time, this is literally 4 years before Google was a company. So again, there was no internet. There was nothing to tell me how to do this. And everybody that I knew told me that if you go vegan, going vegetarian is one thing, but if you go vegan, you really have a risk of getting sick. So I was scared for that. But at the same time, at that point, I didn't care. So I was totally prepared to be sick because I didn't want anything to do with this. So I went vegan that day, and that was 25 years ago, a little over 25 years ago. And immediately, well, I should have said this, after I went vegetarian, I had significantly more energy within a couple weeks. And it was noticeable too for me. And I have to also disclose that I was born with a heart condition that I was told I would never outgrow. And my heart condition had to do with my pulmonary artery going to my lungs. So I just kind of figured that the reason why I was lethargic and out of breath a lot as a kid, even though I was very active, was because of my heart condition. And immediately I felt more energy after going vegetarian. And then when I went vegan, I felt even better, even though everybody told me that I was going to get sick. And a few years later, I ended up going to a heart specialist, and they checked out my heart again. And to my surprise, I had outgrown it, something that they told me I would never do. They said I'm normal, and I don't have any reason to like pre-medicate when I go to the dentist anymore, because that's something that I had to do before when I was younger. So I was happy, and I'm not saying that this is because I went vegan, but I've always tried to live a healthy lifestyle. So I'm just wondering if it had something to do with it. I guess we'll never know. But I definitely felt a lot better, a lot healthier, not lethargic, more energy after I went vegan. And the other thing that I can tell you, some of the effects that I felt from the time I went vegetarian, and I can't prove that this is the reason why, but this is exactly what I did at that time. And a symptom that I used to have didn't happen anymore. So before I was 14, I would get sick pretty often, and I would get throbbing headaches. And I don't know if they were migraines or not. I can't gauge whether it was a migraine or not, but it was pretty bad. These headaches were horrible, and my mom would give me pain medicine or aspirin or Tylenol and tell me, I'd feel better. And I never did. I just would take it and be like, okay, I'm supposed to feel better, but never did it ever help. And I would always get really sick several times a year. But after I went vegetarian, that was going on 30, we're a couple months away from going on 30 years ago. So this was March of 1990, almost 30 years ago. I have not had a single headache since. In 30 years, no headache, knock on wood. I rarely ever get sick. I used to get sick all the time. Now it's rare, maybe once every year and a half to 2 years. And when I do get sick, it's usually a bug that I have for about 18 to 24 hours, and then I'm fine. The last time I was sick was Christmas Day last year. So that's almost a year ago. And still have not had a headache since. And I'm so thankful for the fact of that. Now, the other thing that I did, there's two things that I did when I was 14. But I'll talk a little bit more about that in another video. I went straight edge. Meaning straight edge is drug-free, alcohol-free, no drugs, no alcohol. But what I also did, I kind of took it a step further, and I decided not to take any more medicine. So no more Tylenol, no more aspirin, none of that stuff. And when I did that, and when I went vegetarian, no more headaches ever again. For me, that's my experience. And that brings me to present day. And veganism, I have seen, it has grown exponentially since I went vegan. I can finally say with confidence that it's mainstream. It's everywhere now. People are talking about it, either positive or negative, but it is being talked about. And this is something that nobody even really knew the word 25 years ago. So it's pretty awesome seeing how it's come from point A to point B. And I can tell you now with confidence that as a long-term vegan, despite what some of these anti-vegans are saying out there, that I am 100% healthy in my 40s. And I've got blood tests, perfect blood tests. My last one was completely perfect, and I should probably go over it with you guys sometime soon. And I feel like I'm in the best shape that I've ever been in. I feel better than I was when I was in my early 20s, and you know, I've always been health conscious because of that. And again, single best decision I had ever made without knowing it at the time. So that pretty much in a nutshell is my vegan story. I went vegan for a couple different reasons, and I think it's great that there's many reasons to be vegan and to stay vegan, and I've found no reasons not to be vegan. I mean, it's so sustainable. I've personally never had a problem with it. I love food just as much as the next person. I love to eat food that tastes good, and I've never had a problem finding delicious foods. In fact, I've increased my food profile since going vegan. I've learned of so many new foods and cuisines and all kinds of stuff. If that can help anybody else in their journey to go vegan, I'd be glad to help out. Let me know in the comments below if you like this video, if you want to see more of these stories, and go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the bell for notifications, all that good stuff, and I will see you guys in the next one.